Too Hurt to Stay is the third book from Casey Watson, I believe, and certainly it's one that I remembered very well from the first time I read it, and this second time that I've read it, it was just as compelling and just as interesting. This is about a young boy called Spencer, and Spencer takes himself into care, which is quite unusual, not unheard of, but he goes into care, and for all things considered, he's not physically appearing to be, in any kind of state of distress. He's not beaten, he's not neglected, but there's clearly something going wrong in his home life that has led him to this situation. And it transpires quite quickly that his home life is definitely not a bed of roses, and his mother is seemingly a drinker, and there's something not quite right about his father as well. And whenever Casey takes him for contact at his house, it's never a straightforward experience. And part of that is because Spencer is a runner. He will flee. When fight or flight kicks in, his body chooses flight and he runs away. And that poses a lot of problems, considering he is 8 years old. He runs away not just when he's at home having contact, but when he's at home with Casey. Sometimes he will just do a disappearing act, if you like, because facing the consequences of his actions is too severe a scenario. It's obviously not that uncommon. Children do run away, but when it's happening this frequently, and when he's 8 years old, it's obviously quite challenging. What I really like about this book is that it really utilizes the point system. Now, I'm not saying I completely favour the point system for every child, but if you're unaware of this system, it's a system that certain agencies fostering in the UK practice, whereby you don't punish bad behaviour as such, you reward positive behaviour. And if there hasn't been enough positive behaviour, children don't have enough points to buy privileges. And in turn, they're not getting those privileges, not because you're punishing them for being bad, but because they haven't been good enough, if that makes sense, which I think is a really interesting concept. And it's all about putting the responsibility in the hands of the child. You are not necessarily issuing punishments to the child. They are just doing things that will prevent themselves from being able to afford, with points, the privileges that they want. And it's really interesting, but this definitely highlights that while Casey's hands were quite tied with this point system, certain times Spencer could have done with a more firm punishment. And he is quite a likeable character as well, which makes it really frustrating when you see him displaying quite negative behaviour. And every now and then he'll give a nugget of information from his home life, which makes you want to scratch deeper and find out what exactly is going on. There's a mental health assessment for Spencer at one point. I won't say the outcome of that, but I feel like it could have gone into a bit more detail about that. Books written by foster carers are quite good at explaining mental health conditions as if you've never heard of them as a reader, so you can get a really good overview. With this one, I didn't really feel like that was the case, and while it's not a mental health condition that I've never heard of, so I'm aware of it, I would have actually liked to have known more about the implications for a child with that diagnosis. And what the progression of that condition could have been like. So there are certainly areas of improvement, but ultimately I really enjoyed it. As I said, I enjoyed it the first time I read it. Equally, I've enjoyed rereading it, and I definitely felt for Spencer. I wanted the best for him, and certainly it's very eye-opening. If you're new to Casey Watson's books, this is as good a place to start as any. I am now actually reading them in order. The first time I read them, it was a lot more all over the place. Now I'm reading them in order of release and enjoying it quite a lot, so I would recommend you do that. But if there's something about this that draws you to it, it's as good a place to start as any. Too Hurt to Stay is definitely a really interesting read.